Hello and welcome to another episode of Corgi Town USA. I am Candy, owner of Corgi Town USA and host. In my lap is Chuckles, of course, our famous spokescorg.
Hi, I'm Catherine, and at my feet is Digby, my son. At home is Indy, my honorary corgi, who is a Great Pyrenees and Lab mix.
He's super mutt.
He's super mutt.
And your fosters.
My fosters. I
Cat
have
is
a
fostering
mama and 6 puppies
Oh my goodness.
that we're fostering.
And then, of course, your kitty.
My kitties,
Yeah, little
Naboo
kitties.
and Star-Lord.
And of course, in studio, we have the rest of the Corgi committee. That is Tito Bandito, the youngest member. And of course, we have good old Booger and Mortimer Barnabas, the mouthiest of the group. So if you hear some borks, welcome to Corgi Town, USA.
Where the corgis rule the town.
100%. And if you're new here, hi, welcome. We are here every week with all things Corgi and pet parent lifestyle. We're going to attack a subject today that is affecting all of us.
That's right.
The economy has been very rough for a very long time.
Yep.
And quote unquote experts see really no end in immediate sight for it. Yay for us. Love that for us. But we all feel the pinch of vet bills. And of course, that's one of the most important things you need for your pet is really good veterinary care. And we love our vets. Thank you so much. Big hearts. We can't have healthy animals without you.
That's right.
So I hold you all in very high regard and very passionate about the veterinary community. And we know that when it comes to emergency bills, that's some of the highest ones.
They are. They
Yeah.
are. I had an emergency not too long ago with Digby.
I have them all the time because I'm a masochist and I have multiple dogs and I keep
Well,
getting
actually, it was Digby and Star-Lord on the same day. It was the cat and the dog.
Yeah.
And
When it rains, it pours.
when it rains, it
Double
pours.
stacked.
And the cat ended up being fine, and Digby took a while, but the bills were tremendous. The bills were absolutely tremendous. And so I'd love some advice. I think I made some good decisions in regard, because Digby's fine now,
Thank
and
goodness. Amen.
I also have the blessing of having a friend who's a veterinarian. He
you advice?
doesn't practice, but he volunteers. He fills in. He's a
Gives you
fill-in
advice,
guy,
yeah.
and he gives me advice. He's at the end of my phone at any time.
Poor guy.
I know, right?
No. But anyway, we wanted to bring, I recently came across a wonderful veterinarian who does some social media work,
Yep.
helps educate us. And he has been kind enough to give us his very valuable time and come on the show.
Yeah.
Should I bring him on?
Absolutely.
Everyone, please welcome Dr. Bill Tancredi. Doctor, welcome.
It's nice to be here. Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, thank you. And if you can, please just introduce yourself. Tell us about you and your show, what you do, aside from, of course, the very important work.
Well, I'm a small animal veterinarian. I own my own practice in southeastern Pennsylvania, just outside of Philadelphia.
Oh,
So you're a masochist too.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And my practice, I've been practicing for about 10 years. My practice has been open for the last 4. And I get to kind of play James Harriet and practice in my hometown and take care of all the pets for my friends and neighbors. So that's I have a pretty lucky job.
Nice.
That's romantic. That's like getting me right in the feels. I love that.
I'm very fortunate.
Yeah, I mean, small town romantic, not romantic in the sense
Right.
like romantic comedy, but it's a very romantic notion. I love that you're able to support a small community that
Yeah.
you're well connected with. And you also do some social media work and public work. You want to talk a little bit about that?
I do. I write a Substack about artificial intelligence use mostly about artificial intelligence use in veterinary medicine, and a little bit about veterinary medicine on its own as well. A couple of years ago, I got very interested in AI, and I wasn't finding a lot of good stuff written about it, so I thought I'd do it myself. And writing's been a fun way for me to interact in the world and be present on social media and learn about a lot of stuff that's happening in vet med that is a lot of it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, we're definitely grateful. I mean, it's the evolution of the medicine is how we're able to get healthy, long-living pets, which is what we want.
And the evolution of the medicine and the research is also what it's not about testing on animals, but the information goes back and forth. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Mhm.
The information from our dogs and cats, okay, how does that apply to the humans? And information from the humans, how does that apply to our dogs and cats?
Well, like
so the information goes back and forth.
Yeah, like the research for DM, for degenerative myelopathy,
Yep.
is helping ALS patients. Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. So as we're talking about this, I came across Dr. Tancredi because I believe it was on LinkedIn.
Okay.
I saw posts about some emergency veterinary bills, and I reached out and I said, I would love to talk more about this. And if I may, I think the subject matter was you had a client that had an emergency, needed
Yep.
some care at a facility after hours, and then came to you for aftercare, and you started reviewing the bills. Would you like to talk a little bit about how we got here in your own words? Because I don't want to talk out of turn.
No. So you got the gist of the story right. I had a client and a patient, and the client was out of town. The patient was with a family member. Patient ate something they shouldn't have. They ended up at an ER, and for what ended up being simple gastrotomy, and less than 24 hours of hospitalization, the bill was about $9,000. And that
I
was
felt
more or
that.
less my response. I had some more four-letter words privately when I
Yeah,
thought
no,
it,
I've got them all going in my head,
but
Yeah.
doctor.
Ooh.
All of them.
and that seemed unnecessarily high to me. Um, but and I'm not saying the ER doc did anything wrong, and it's possible that they were uh, trying. It seemed likely from the bill that they were trying to avoid surgery, so they were trying the emetics and they were trying um, to scope them, and they were trying to avoid the surgery. Whereas if you had jumped straight to the surgery, it would have been a lot less. But it was it upsets me because that if these owners hadn't been people of some means, like their dog would have died,
Mm-hmm.
and he didn't have to, right?
Yeah.
That surgery, a lot of places would cost a third of what they did at the emergency facility, and I, you know, this is a case where they had kind of a whisper down the lane. They're trying to avoid upsetting the owners. They're trying to do the bare minimum. They're trying to keep the dog alive. So it's an unusual situation.
Yeah.
I don't think they did anything wrong, but the cost was high. I mean, prohibitively expensive for most people. And it was a corporate owned practice,
Mm-hmm.
emergency practice. And, you know, I feel differently about it because I think the person who sets the prices should also be the person who has to tell the client that their dog can't get care and has to die. Um,
Yeah.
because I think when you separate those two by too much, you end up with this really too much of a disconnect between uh, the people and the
The
business.
situation. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's like a shroud there. It shrouds them from the
Yeah,
responsibility of
you don't have to care if
the
you're a
aftermath.
corporation.
Yep.
You don't know that dog, you've never or cat, or you've never met that animal.
And I want to talk about the perspective too. So we're huge on perspective here, which is part of why we're so glad to have you here. On your post where you kind of talked about this is kind of the
Mm-hmm.
breakdown of what this was charged, and I feel like this is a little exuberant. There were some people that were commenting, and I very much tapped into. There were, I believe, two individuals. I'm not going to call them out, but they said, I used to own one of these practices. Here's the problem with that. And of course, I glommed on and was trying to pick that apart. Okay, please tell us. We want to hear that side of it.
Mm-hmm.
And we understand veterinary bills are high anyway, but we understand why it's
Mm-hmm.
that way. You have specialized skill that you studied for. It's expensive to get that.
Sure.
It also takes a lot of time and a lot of emotional, mental, and spiritual energy to do that. You should be compensated. One, so should your staff. Two, there's so much research
Yeah.
that goes into this, and we need to be able to pay for that, the work, the time, the effort, all of that. I understand so much the importance of all that. when it comes to emergency practices, they have to pay a staff to be there around the clock because they're serving those after hours.
Yes.
And we need our care workers to have balance in their life and not work around the clock and be able to take vacations and have time with their families. For heaven's sakes, you are human. So I understand why it's there. And that part all made sense to me. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you actually went down a formula like, look, even if you marked this up this much, you're still within a profit margin and you're still paying your staff. There's not really this, there's a portion here that you can't really explain. And this is, again, I'm talking out of turn here, but this is pulling from that conversation. I remember thinking they really didn't address you. They kind of left that out there. Can you please explain this extra portion of, I would love to hear your take on my digestion of that.
There's a lot to digest there.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm trying to be respectful and kind.
No. I think that's one of the important things, and one of the reasons I agreed to do this podcast is because we have to have these conversations.
Sure.
Because by posting that, I got a lot of responses, and some were positive and some were negative and some were, laudatory and some were hateful.
Perspective is everything.
Perspective is everything. And it's, I have a rough idea of what it costs to run a hospital because I do that.
Run one.
Their, CVTs on overnights probably cost more than my CVTs on a 9-to-5 job. But, we're all buying the same cefazolin and it's only a couple bucks a bottle. So some of that stuff was marked up pretty considerate, like more than 1,000%. And, there's different ways to mark things up. And like some veterinary services will be like, it's this much for a shot. And you'll go somewhere else and it'll be like, oh, it's cheaper for a shot, but they also charge you for the syringe and there's an injection fee and there's a medical disposal fee. And some people just lump it all together, and that's okay, right? Like that's
sure.
But there were some people who were saying, it's an ER, it's more expensive to run. That's true, but it's definitely more expensive, harder to run. It's harder to find people. There's a smaller population of CVTs who can are interested in and actively looking out for emergency work. Right. And there's even fewer of those who are looking to work overnights.
Right.
It's hard, working 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. on a Wednesday night is not a lot of fun.
Sure. And you see some of the worst cases with all the triaging.
Sure.
And
Yep. And guys like me can punt, right? Like I'm like, oh man, I don't want to deal with that. Go to the emergency room. And so I can kind of pick and choose my cases. They're a tertiary care facility. They're supposed to be the last line of defense. Mm-hmm. So they don't get to say no like I do, not nearly as often. But that bill still seems kind of high to me. Pretty high to me. And there's people who said, oh, I did this a few years ago and I ran a hospital a few years ago. And it's like, it's not the same as it was 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. We're on the one hand, we're better at medicine than we've ever been. Stuff that dogs wouldn't have survived 10 and 15 years ago, they're surviving.
Some of the survivability of parvo, things like that. When I was a kid, that was tripled. A death sentence. Yeah.
I mean, it's almost tripled in my career. Like that's
amazing.
That's astonishing. That's great.
Yeah.
So we are, the cost of vet care has gone up a lot, and so has the quality. And it's hard because it's, it's hard to demonstrate that to the pet owners because like you just see me give a shot and do a thing and wave my hands and then hand you a bill and the dog is better. And you're like, well, what was all that about?
Right.
But the drugs are better than they've ever been. There's more drugs than there's ever been. So
we have specialists now.
A lot more specialists, which is great.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more. I think there's becoming kind of an in-between space where you're seeing a lot of doctors like me who are more than primary care doctors. They're like, the phrase I use is secondary care doctors.
Okay.
You know, we won't keep a patient overnight with 24-hour care, but if you can't afford the ER, we can do the splenectomy, or we can do the gastrotomy, or we can do the cystotomy, or we can do the, we can
Right.
unblock the cat, or we can monitor the patient, and we've got, cameras in the kennel, and it's, on your Nest Cam.
Right.
And so we can do a high level of medicine without the extremely high cost, and which comes with the high overhead of running an ER.
Right.
Which is fun. I mean, that's what a lot of us signed up to do, is do really good medicine for pets, right? Like that's what we went to vet school to do. We didn't want to be a shot clinic. We didn't want to be a specialist. We wanted to be a good doctor for all of them.
Right. And I think, saying for me to say, holy $9,000, what the bleep, bleep, bleep. And that's one thing, that's okay. This is what happens when you have a pet. For a vet to say, I'm sorry, $9,000 for that.
Yeah.
That's where the concern, I think, lies when someone in the industry, as it were, says, what
Something's going on
thinking?
here.
Something's going on here. Yeah.
And that's talking about like how we got here, right?
Yeah, we need to have those conversations. Like, is that too much? Is that reasonable? And you saw, I think, in that post on LinkedIn that there were a lot of very emotional responses.
Definitely.
And from doctors. And I mean, mine was a largely emotional response.
Well, you were advocating for your patient. You were advocating for your patient and the family.
Yeah, I mean, I would have done the same. Like, this is why a lot of my clients have my cell phone number. It's why I get the voicemails for the practice on my cell phone after hours, because, I'm not trying to take somebody else's business or save somebody $6,000, but, that could be the difference between a dead dog and a live one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm all about. So I'm glad the ER is available. And I know, I've cherry picked the case, right? Like, they could have gone above and beyond and discounted a dozen cats for little old nuns all week long, and I picked one where they really blew it up, right?
Sure.
So,
but we know it's common.
It's not fair. It's not unheard of.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
We know it's common. We hear it all the time. And we have some nonprofit organizations that we've talked to that help owners with vet bills.
They help me.
Yeah. So we're very piped into this conversation in different ways. And so we very much honor your perspective on it. And go ahead.
The other thing I want to mention before it slips my mind is,
sure.
The veterinarians aren't necessarily making more money because the cost of care has gone up.
Yeah.
Right? You feel angry at the person like me or the ER vet who said, hey, it's $9 million to save your dog's life. But what you don't hear is that lab costs go up 20% a year, and the cost of goods sold has gone up 40%.
Mm-hmm.
And, my supplier of PPE, like gloves, masks, caps, like surgical gear, during COVID, they tripled the price of a box of masks and gloves. Like a box of latex gloves was $45, and it started at 15. And like, just because my prices have gone up doesn't mean I'm making any more money.
Right.
And on a lot of stuff, I'm making less.
Yeah. And I'm guessing that the price of gloves now that COVID is over, and the price of masks now that COVID is over, has not gone down.
Yeah.
No, it didn't fall despite the lack of demand. Yeah.
Of course not.
So, I do think, the cost of veterinary care has gone up for sure, but that doesn't mean the profits have. in every situation.
Yeah.
And another thing to keep in mind is that there are all sorts of different veterinary practices.
Right.
There's a tremendous plurality of veterinarians in hospitals, and there's 28, 29,000 general practice veterinary hospitals in the United States. Half of them are independently owned, and they are as different as all their owners.
Yes.
And that, I think, is a good thing, because that, while the profession isn't demographically diverse, their personalities certainly are.
Oh, yeah.
But that, to me, is a good thing for pet owners, because you can find somebody with whom you connect. And if I was
Exactly.
giving you any advice about picking a veterinarian, I'd find someone you trust, because when you're emotional and when you're in those, stressful, emotional, I don't know what to do situations, having somebody you already trust tell you, hey, this
Yes.
is what we need to do, this is what I would do in your situation,
Yep.
is everything, right? Like, it's, because you don't I'm an honest to God expert at this little tiny sliver of the universe, but I'm really good at it.
Right.
I don't, I can't, I couldn't tell you anything about how to, dunk a basketball, or how to sing a song, or anything like, or how to fix a car, but I'm good at this.
Yeah.
So if you ask my advice about this, it's probably good advice, and you should. So when you're looking for a vet, find somebody you trust.
Exactly. Yeah.
And if that takes a minute to find, okay.
That I think, well, that was my situation. I know I'm going to interrupt you and jump in. But we had a vet that is a personal family friend, and he sold his practice. Okay, great. So, but he's at the end of my phone, all the time. And there was another vet in the neighborhood that absolutely a bunch of my friends said, "Oh, she's great. She's great. She's great." Wigan, almost 2 years ago, year and a half ago, was bit by a rattlesnake. And we took him to emergency, because that is the only place that has what he needs,
antivenom.
The antivenom. And I didn't know that everybody in the U.S. knew what antivenom was, because we're here in Phoenix. Anyway, so perfect, absolutely everything. And then when my friend Dr. Eric took a look at him, and we needed somebody nearby in the neighborhood. Dr. Eric was a 45-minute drive away. We went to the vet that friends recommended, and she said, "Oh, I don't deal in the snake bites or whatever." And it's like, no, it's been several weeks. We just need wound care. So I'm paying attention to what I said, and it was a while before I was able to find a vet, and I have found a vet in Tempe, and I absolutely love the practice, and I absolutely love him. And when Digby was sick, and we again took him to the emergency room, that's a whole other story, where they said, well, the last time you were here, he swallowed something, so we need to do x-rays. No, do something else. He didn't swallow anything. I was watching him. But long story short, after we did the emergency, they couldn't figure it out. We found a vet, and the vet was, doing testing. It was, nobody could figure it out. And then they finally did. There was some sort of infection, but it wasn't obvious. And, Dr. Eric on my phone again, I'm like, this is what's going on. What the hell's going on? And he made several suggestions for me to ask the vet about. Trusting the vet, he said, well, I don't want to do this $600 test because A, B, C, and D. And I texted that back to Dr. Eric, and Dr. Eric said, okay, he sees something that I don't. Go ahead with that diagnosis. So yes, I have a friend in the business, as it were.
Not everybody has that.
And I am now able to completely trust my vet to say, no, you don't need this $600 test. It was valley fever. And valley fever is something that's common out
Regional,
here.
yeah.
It's regional among humans and
I've
your
never seen a
animals.
case. Yep.
Right. So it's
Long
here.
side of the country. Yep.
And so the vet was knowledgeable enough to say, no, we're going to do this antibiotic first rather than a $600 test. And so that's when you can trust. And when somebody else, I have the blessing of somebody else that backed up what the vet said and said, okay, that makes sense. But it's so important that you find somebody that you have a good personality with and that you trust.
Well, this is part and parcel of this very conversation. This is Dr. Tancredi's patient that came back and said,
Yeah.
This is what we went through with this situation. We need your aftercare. And then this is kind of how we got into this. They have you, they can trust you. And that's kind of segueing into, how do you think we got here? And I love that you brought up how the veterinarians are not really making more money.
No.
Yeah. I hate to say it's a bean counter problem, right?
Yeah, well, veterinarian salaries have jumped a lot. And I think that number is a little misleading because, for one thing, we had some catching up to do. Salaries hadn't really risen for 15 or 20 years, and then all of a sudden they jumped a lot.
Okay.
The other thing that happened was a lot of veterinarians moved, like a lot of the new generation of veterinarians prefer a salary compensation model rather than a production compensation model. When I graduated, a production compensation or a pro-sal model where you had, a low base salary, and then based on how much you worked and how much you earned, you made a percentage of the total, right? Now it's more, you're seeing a lot more flat salaries, which are much higher than, the initial salaries. Like I knew veterinarians who had never renegotiated their initial salary from when they, graduated 20 years ago, because they didn't need to. Their production was based, or their compensation was based on how much, production they made. And, but now, so you're seeing a higher salary numbers, but it's a little misleading to say that, oh, vets are making more. It's like, yeah, we had some catching up to do.
Right.
And then,
but I don't think that's also why we're having $9,000 emergency vet bills.
if not, no.
Yeah.
I do think that is a bean counter problem.
Yeah. A profit center.
I do want to talk about the one thing you mentioned from your vet, that the first thing I thought of when you said, oh my God, the vet said this and wanted to do an x-ray, wanted to do this or that or the other thing.
Right.
And I will say that I don't think there's only a handful of veterinarians in the world who are better communicators than they are at medicine. We spend years learning medicine. We might get 2 weeks of practice in a business course or a communications course.
Right.
So we're really good at some things and we're very mediocre at others.
Yep.
And a friend of mine gives a talk, and he loves to cite this statistic that 97% of veterinarians think they're above average at client communication. And that's really not how averages work.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So if you're not communicating well with your vet, you either need to find a better way, right? Like maybe it's changing to emails or something, or finding a vet with whom you communicate better.
Yes.
Because if your vet can't deliver the message that you need to hear, and you can't hear the message that they're delivering, medicine's going to stop. Like, we're not going to go any further, and your dog is not going to get the test he needs.
Yes.
And
well, and you have also, if I may, there's also basically a prognostic process. So what you are being recommended, this goes back to trusting your vet. They're recommending certain tests based on their knowledge and what they think has happened based on the information you give them. So I want to make that important, because it's easy to say, we don't have to do x-rays. They didn't need anything, when they're looking at prognostic indicators and what the symptoms are. So I want to put that in there as a perspective.
And the symptoms were very, very different than, so I went back to the same vet emergency place that I'd gone to before that did an amazing job on Digby when Digby swallowed a rock. Yes, my dog swallowed a rock. Idiot.
Corgis eat everything.
Corgis eat everything. And the doctor did not want to do surgery. She said, let's try this first. And it worked. She was beyond amazing. Wonderful. You go back in the afternoon, it's a different doctor. And what the doctor said to me, and this is where the New Yorker, this is where the mama stepped back of do whatever you have to do. And the New Yorker and the logic stepped in. And I said, wait a minute. The second vet said, well, he's swallowed a rock in the past, therefore he must have swallowed a rock. And there was everything that I told her, from his vomiting the night before to the not eating to the not going out to everything, had absolutely no indication that it was the same. There was nothing the same about the situation. And that's where I said, wait a minute.
Right. But I wanted to put that in there
But yes,
because if someone's
absolutely.
listening, they might say, well, there's a reason why you want to listen to the vets. And then
Yeah,
this
yes.
goes back to what we were talking about. Is this a bean counter problem? And that's where I think the problem lies,
I think
because
so.
we learned, I serve on the board for Shade Out DM for degenerative myelopathy awareness. And we attend the Western Veterinary Conference, and it helps us. At the time, I had my dog Hammer, who had degenerative myelopathy, and it helped some of the techs that hadn't seen it see what the presentation of symptoms look. So he got to be kind of a little spokescord for a while during his time here. But doing that, we learned that that's kind of been an increasing problem where these clinics are being purchased by investment firms. And we see this in human medicine as well.
Oh,
and
yeah.
it's creating a monster because there's this gap between, you have people like yourself, Dr. Tancredi, that are in the vet techs that are very passionate about care and the way you should do it, and versus you have a board of directors that have to answer to shareholders. To me, in something like care that is imperative to health and well-being, both people and pets, is very problematic in my estimation because of this, because then you have that problem.
Yes.
And going back to trusting your vet and having someone that you can trust, not everyone has that. But I've been in similar situations where I've had to go to emergency, and I don't want to get lost in anecdotes, but Chuckles, one time I was afraid he ate a piece of medicine, an naproxen sodium. I was taking one for headache, and I heard him crunch on something. I thought, oh my gosh, did I drop one? And I didn't want to take any time worrying about that. So I just brought him right in.
Yep.
And at one point, he went ahead and did overnight and did the fluids. I was trusting them. They had presented to me some process where it was almost like dialysis, where they used plasma. Forgive me, I don't remember, this is a few years ago, but they said, oh, basically we pull the blood out and we clean it and we put it back in. That is a lot to put a little dog through, that when we think he ingested. We've already done the vomiting, we've done the fluids, we've done the, I feel like that's pretty tough to do something so invasive, and it was several $1,000s. At that point, I was feeling more like I was trying to be sold something,
Yes.
as opposed to getting good advice care for my dog. And that's where it helped to go back to my vet. And this is interesting because my vet was looking at the bill going, they really kind of stuck you on some of this. I had a very similar situation in that instance, but I wanted to come full circle with that. It goes back to, like you said, trusting your vet. I think that's how we got here, as investment firms buying up ER.
And regarding trusting your vet doesn't mean trust without question.
Right.
Like you can, just because the veterinarian might be, below average at communication doesn't mean they're off the hook. Like you're allowed to say, hey, can you explain this to me again? Can you put this in terms? I'm not sure I follow this or that or the other thing. And that's something you should do. You should advocate for yourself.
Yeah.
Not, I mean, I would ask that it's polite and friendly and gently, but even by East Coast standards. And
inquisitive, not accusatory.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, most vets I know would be very happy to explain themselves, right? Like explain, we need to do this because blah, 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 blah. And if you say, what about this? They'll say, okay, I've considered this, but, I mean, most vets are pretty good at that.
Yeah. And from a personality,
if you invite it.
Yeah. From a personality perspective, yes, don't be accusatory. But from a personality perspective, most vets, most doctors, most are on the scale, if you do disc or core or whatever scale of expert, and they love to explain to you because you're not an expert, you have no idea. So nothing personal, doctor, but
No,
that is your personality, and
I
and
understand.
it's this real true love of going, I can tell you all these things.
Yeah, look at this
So yeah,
nifty thing I can do to help you.
yeah,
Yeah, it's like
exactly. And
really cool. Yeah,
it's not an ego thing. It's just who they are. And so ask the question because they love to be able to tell you all these wonderful things, not from an ego basis, but from I really
Education.
want to, I want to share this.
But
we
that's going back to
yeah
trust.
Yeah.
Mine knows how to
we
talk
like
to me.
helping.
Yeah.
If that's how we can help you is by explaining what we're doing, that's pretty neat. Like most vets are like, oh, I'm happy to spend the time with you and do this and that and the other thing.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
and regarding, so I would totally encourage you, like, um, when I say trust the vet, I mean it, but not without, like, if you have questions, ask the questions. Like, let
Yeah.
us, I'd much rather you ask the questions and let me explain it to you than you not and go home with a sour look on your face going, well, he didn't explain anything. It's like,
Right.
I'm better with animals than people. You're going to have to help me out a little bit.
Exactly.
But that communication, to your point, that is very important. That's and I'm extremely neurotic about my animals. It's
Yes.
yeah, it's clinical at this point.
Yes.
But mine knows how to talk to me. The vet techs will come in, they'll say, just send Dr.
Understand.
Roach in. Yeah. So
Yeah.
she knows how to talk to me. She knows how to talk me down off the ledge where I'm in panic mode and what about this? And then come in and just tell me like it is. So that's being able to communicate well.
And so, with trusting your vet and asking the questions, how do you, this is my baby, this is my baby. How do you go from this super high, super stressed emotion and not go all the way into you're trying to rake me over the coals, you're trying to make a buck for your corporation? Where is that middle ground?
Well, part of it is this information in this podcast.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
We're giving you some perspective to
right.
understand both sides.
And so, doctor, what can we
Do as patients,
yeah, do as the
patient
moms,
parents.
as the mama and the daddy, to come to that middle ground?
How can we help be better patients?
Yes.
So, again, great plurality of veterinarians. If you're being, I would say a couple of things. One, everyone should know that diagnostics are usually more expensive than treatment. Like the labs, the X-rays, the ultrasounds, that kind of stuff are often more expensive, but they're often like a one-time cost, or hopefully a one-time cost, right? Like we can
Right.
do this and we can get a diagnosis. Most veterinarians will start with certain testing that is that represents a way to get the most, like, catch the most common cause of whatever's going on with your dog, right? Like if a
Okay.
dog's vomiting and he has a history of eating stuff, X-rays are probably a good idea. Are they the only thing I'm going to do? Probably not, but they're definitely on the list. Um, I would, the question I would ask about diagnostics, if you want to question diagnostics, is the diagnostic going to guide our treatment?
Aha. Good
Right.
question.
So there's some people who, will just carpet bomb with diagnostics.
Mhm.
And if you have a really sick patient, that's probably not a bad idea. You need lots of information. But if you're doing a test, it's like, well, um, it's not going to change the treatment plan, then I don't know that I'd run it. I mean, then it becomes like, well, that's an interesting and curious case.
That's the difference between actually diagnostics and not throwing something at the wall to see what sticks.
Right,
So to
or
speak.
running a test that's not, I would only run a test that I thought was necessary.
Okay.
And my definition of necessary would be diagnostic would be something that's going to affect treatment, or something that's going to, diagnose and thus decide treatment, or rule things out that will then advance the diagnostics, right? Like if I take an X-ray of your dog with a history of eating rocks, and there's no rocks and there's no evidence of GI upset or anything else, then it's like, let's go hunting for valley fever or something else that could be causing the vomiting.
Which is not a frequent symptom of valley fever, by the way.
No,
Vomiting is typically not part of the presentation.
It's good to know. Even I didn't know that. But you know why I didn't know that? Because I've never seen a case. I have spent
You're
my
in a different
entire
region.
career on this half of the country,
Right.
and I've never had a case of valley fever.
You have the tick-borne diseases there.
Yes.
Oh, in spades, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
every day of the week.
There used to be a company, I hope they're still around. I recently posted about it. They were called Ticknology. And I visited my dad in Arkansas and pulled a tick off Chuckles. And of course, I panicked and thought, oh, it's catastrophized. It's the end of the world because we don't typically get a lot of ticks here. Up in the mountains, we will, but they're not real common here.
No.
They happen, but they're not common. And so I pulled that tick off and I froze it and I sent it to the lab and I had them test for everything. It was negative for everything.
That's good.
It's well worth the money. Yeah.
Pulled one off my newborn the other day or yesterday.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a
So
thing.
We'll be Googling technology in a few minutes here.
Yeah, I know. Well, and I think that's kind of part and parcel of this conversation. We have different concerns in different regions, like some of them across the board. Bordetella, kennel cough, parvo, distemper. We know these are, kind of across the board, but then there's also regional diseases. And that is kind of talking about valley fever.
Yeah.
We've had friends that have moved out of the valley that have had dogs that had it and had to find a vet that was proficient in treating it when they lived in a new region.
Yeah.
Yep. Those kind of things are concerning, but that's part of the power and the communication of what you're doing is being on social media, connecting to groups, getting that communication out there, and it helps us. But I also don't want to keep you all night, doctor. I know that you have a very busy life. I want to talk about two things. Last piece of advice for our audience on this subject from your lips, and then also how our audience can follow you and support your media you're doing.
My last piece of advice would be regarding pet ownership. I would say work to find a vet you trust and that you like and you get along with and works for you. And I'm the first, or at least among the first, to point out that I'm not everybody's cup of tea, but no one is. So work to find a vet and work to build that relationship in a positive way.
Yep.
And I think that'll do more for your pets than any other single piece of advice I could give you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. And then to follow me, I'm on LinkedIn. You're welcome to add me or follow me on LinkedIn. I have a Substack. It's called Docs Fire. It's drtank.substack.com. And I write about vet med and AI and all kinds of fun stuff in technology. I'm always honored when people listen or read what I have to say. So I welcome the followers, and if anybody wants to reach out, I will do my very level best to get back to you. But
Thank you for that.
You have an almost 4-month-old, so I'm a little less responsive than I used to be.
You're a little busy. Yeah. Congratulations.
A little bit. Yeah. Congratulations.
Yeah, but he's a little bugger, but he takes a lot of focus and time.
Yes.
I can't imagine.
Great, but it's like, where did all my time go?
What did I do before all this?
Yeah. I don't know. I think I had free time.
Exactly. I slept and I had free time. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
And AI is part of our future, both in medicine and in life in general. So
yes,
it's a lot of fun. If you want to read about it, I'm out.
Yeah.
I've published a bunch.
Well, and I will drop those links into the description box of both the YouTube video as well as on the virtual platforms if you listen, so that you can have easy click to follow Dr. Tancredi. Doctor, thank you so much for your time, and we appreciate you.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Take care.
Well, now that we're talking about finding vets that we trust,
yes,
one of my pathological fears is that mine's going to retire.
They will eventually.
I know, and I tell her all the time, I'm like, I'm still alive. You can't retire. I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to be. But we hope that you enjoyed this episode. We hope that it gave you very important perspective. We encourage you to follow the good doctor here. Great information. Definitely educated us as parents.
I want to repeat that question that he said. Is this test going to affect the treatment
Yeah.
That's huge.
So
Like, I never thought.
wonderful question.
Yes, that's
to
a
ask.
wonderful question.
Yeah.
Is this test going to affect the treatment? I love it.
Yeah. Great advice from Dr. Tancredi.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for following
Thank
us.
you.
We will see you next week.
Bye.